Welcome to the first wildcard team of the new season, and I typically do these every single week. There might be the odd occasion where I don't and instead focus on the free hit, for example, but the wildcard is a big fabric of this channel in UCL Fantasy and FPL. Keep your eyes peeled for UCL Fantasy content, by the way, as the app is now live, but of course we don't have the fixtures confirmed yet, so I'll probably build a rough draft. If you want to see it, then let me know down the comment section below, but there will be much more content in a couple of weeks time once we know the fixtures and we can start building the best team in that fantasy format. But let's focus on Game Week 2 in FPL today, and on screen you can see Draft Hound, who have the player rankings or in terms of the best predicted points for the next 3 game weeks, and they've got some very interesting results. As you can see, Salah is top with 26.5 in a 3 game week period, Haaland second, and we've got Saka, Jota, Trent, Havertz, Kovacic, Gvardiol, Welbeck. So very comprehensive top 10 completed by Rico Lewis and Dominic Szoboszlai. So let me know your thoughts down the comment section below about this. Have you tried out Draft Town? You can experiment with it for as little as £2 per week, and there is an affiliate link in the description below. And if you enjoy my content, smash the like button and subscribe for new, getting this to over 200 likes on YouTube, and let's keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers. We hit 26k yesterday, so thank you very much for your support. And the Trans Tips video on podcast was released yesterday, and that's where I discuss 11 players to buy, hold, sell and skip. The team selection is coming very soon, and I could also do a predicted lineups just like I did for Game Week 1. I got a few clubs spot on, but generally speaking I was a few off, maybe 10 out of 11 or maybe 8 or 9. But what it really does is give you an idea of the players who are suspended, injured, and the players that are very likely to start for every Premier League club, so it's still fairly useful from that perspective. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. For those that are new to FPL, it's worth considering a few things. You have to pick 2 goalkeepers, 5 defenders, 5 midfielders and 3 forwards. Quite standard if you've played World Cup, Euro or UCL Fantasy in the past, but there are some key changes. No ball recoveries, no player of the match awards, but bonus points is quite similar as you would have seen over the weekend. And the biggest differences are no limitless chip, and you can't make any changes to your team once the deadline has passed. That includes the captaincy. You can't captain a player on every single day, and you also can't make substitutions manually like you can in UCL Fantasy, but I'll be covering that in UCL Fantasy. Be sure to try that out, by the way. It's a great fantasy format. If you enjoyed the Euros, you definitely will enjoy UCL Fantasy this season. But let's start with the 2 goalkeepers. We've got 100 million in budget. We build that team value from the players we have in our squad once they go up in price, but in terms of selling value, that is very different. You need a player to go up by 0.2 million before you gain 0.1 million in that selling price. But let's get straight into it and start off with the main goalkeeper for the best wildcard team. I won't sugarcoat it. The next 4 fixtures for Arsenal look terrible on paper. 1 clean sheet is possible, but I'd be very surprised if they kept 2 or 3. But David Raya would be a long-term purchase on the wildcard, and you don't want to change your goalkeepers too often. Now, there are several alternatives who are even cheaper, like Nick Pope and also Jordan Pickford, who I still rate in the long term, and even a Dean Henderson who costs 4.5 million can offer decent value. But my favourite is David Raya because you cover the best defence in the league in Arsenal, and it's the cheapest entry, a nailed-on starter week in, week out. Jurriën Timber also costs 5.5 million. He may start against Aston Villa, but that won't be the case every single game week from now until the end of the season. You have Calafiori and Zinchenko, not to mention Kivior if he stays at the club. So Arsenal have plenty of options in the back line. Even Tomiyasu can play as a left back, although he hasn't done it very often during his Arsenal career. But David Raya is my favourite way of covering the Gunners' defence right now, especially given the next 4 fixtures, which has Aston Villa away, Brighton at home, Tottenham away and Man City away. Then there's some pretty promising fixtures against 2 newly promoted clubs between game week 6 to 9, and then more difficult games like Newcastle, Chelsea and Liverpool all back to back. But after that period from game week 12 until pretty much March or April, Arsenal have an incredible fixture run. But of course, now for the next 4 fixtures, you might be thinking, why go for David Raya? I still think Arsenal can keep a clean sheet in those games, and he'd be a long-term purchase for your FPL team. Now, the backup goalkeeper can be anyone who costs 4 million. You may want to go for 2 4.5 million rotating goalkeepers. I'm not a big fan of that, so I'm just going to go for the most likely 4 million starter, and in my opinion that's probably going to be Bentley, but you could make a case that will be Fabianski or Vladimirson from Brentford. I think one of those 3 are the most likely to start as a 4 million goalkeeper, but that all depends on if the main choice, the number 1 picks for each of those clubs, stays or goes to another club in the end during the transfer window. There are 2 weeks left, but honestly, I don't see a 4 million starting goalkeeper this season. So David Raya at 5.5 million is more than enough to start week in, week out. Perhaps I'm spending a lot of money in the defensive line. Let me know down in the comment section below if you feel that's the case. But Trent Alexander-Arnold is worth that price tag. Without getting any goals or assists, he was on course for maximum bonus points over Mohamed Salah, who got a goal and an assist in that 2-0 win over Ipswich Town. In the end, Trent still got 2 bonus points, and he's going to get a lot of them this season, particularly in the first 8 game weeks of the season, where Liverpool are top of the fixture difficulty rating. So Trent is an excellent pick, and as you saw with Quansah, he's not completely nailed on, and Trent is worth the extra 2.5 million over him. You could make a case for Virgil van Dijk or Andrew Robertson, and that's completely fair enough, but I think Trent is the best of the lot. I'm going for another premium defender here, and I have to say I'm a bit hesitant about this, but the fixtures are great, and he got a return in Game Week 1 with a clean sheet. He was so close to getting a bonus point against Chelsea, and of course I'm referring to Gvardiol, who is a very template pick. You could even save a bit of money here, go for another premium defender who's also template in Pedro Porro, who won't get many clean sheets, but the attack and returns will certainly be there. He scored Tottenham's opening goal of the season against Leicester in that 1-1 draw. So one of Gvardiol or Porro, depends on your preference there, but I think City will keep more clean sheets and they've got better fixtures. I just would avoid all Tottenham players if possible, particularly defenders against Newcastle away and Arsenal at home in Game Weeks 3 and 4. After that though, I think Porro is a great pick on the wildcard, and you'll probably see him in a future edition of the best wildcard team. Now we've got 3 other defenders that will be much cheaper, of course. We are blessed with 4.5 million options, at least on paper, and I'm going to go for Robinson, who is arguably the best of the lot. I still think Joachim Andersen over the course of the season will be the highest scoring 4.5 million defender, but Robertson has great fixtures to kickstart this season. Man United away was the most difficult. They got that out of the way, and it was a 1-0 defeat, and it was a very late winner by the new signing Xerxes. But I still think Robinson is excellent value, and I wouldn't go for Castagna or Tete. I think there'll be a lot of rotation on the right hand side for Fulham. You do have Sessegnon now as a new signing for Fulham, but I don't think Robinson will be in danger whatsoever, at least for the first few months of the season. So we have 2 slots left, and I would recommend going for another 4.5 million defender. I'm not a big fan of having 2 4 million options in this position. It can work out, and there are plenty of options who will start week in, week out, like Harwood Bellis, Bednarek, Stevens, also Vestergaard and Wout Fass, but I don't expect many returns over the course of the season, and with the 4.5 million options at your disposal, I see way more clean sheets, possibly more bonus points and attack and returns. So I'm going to go for a Newcastle defender here in Lewis Hall, but I do admit the best way of covering them defensively is Nick Pope in goal, and I wouldn't mind that if you went for Nick Pope instead of David Raya, but then you have no Arsenal defensive coverage whatsoever, which isn't necessarily a bad thing for the next 4 game weeks, but I think long term it would be a slight issue. So I have gone for Lewis Hall, who might not be the most nailed on starter in the world, but I expect him to get plenty of starts and minutes this season, and my prediction during the summer was that he'll get 25 plus starts and be the main left back for Newcastle United. But finally, we've got 1 4 million defender slot left here, and I'm going to go for potentially the best of the lot, and that's going to be Greaves, who showed a bit of attacking threat against Liverpool, mainly in aerial duels. So that's one to definitely look at. Don't stum against Man City away in Game Week 2, of course, but from Game Week 3 onwards, the fixtures get better for Ipswich Town on paper. There could be a clean sheet over the next 4 game weeks, and for a 4 million option, you can't ask for much more. Barco was a big disappointment. Greaves has shown a bit of potential, and in terms of 4 million defenders, there's no clear standout just yet, but I would give the edge to the Ipswich Town centre-back. If you can't go for Salah, or you're going in a different direction with your FPL squad, my recommendation is to buy Jota and Trent. I think that's the best way of covering Liverpool if you can't go for the best of the lot in Mohamed Salah. Now, Jota's a very efficient player. Off the bench, he can score a goal in a very limited cameo, but he will start in the next couple of weeks, week in, week out. My major concern would be the international break after Game Week 3, where we could see Cody Gakpo start in Game Week 4, for example, and it all depends on how these players get on for their countries during the international break, if they pick up an injury or if they play a lot of minutes. So let's keep an eye out during those international breaks, which is coming very soon, of course, but Jota should be the main striker. until he gets injured, and hopefully it doesn't happen anytime soon. Unfortunately though, he does pick up a lot of problems throughout his time at Liverpool. So Jota is definitely a big recommendation for me. And next up is one of the best midfielders in the game in Bukayo Saka, and I think this duo of Jota and Saka can also work very well if you don't have Mohamed Salah, who is the best midfielder for the first 8 game weeks of the season, but you've got that Arsenal and Liverpool coverage offensively, and these two combined can match Salah or even outperform him in certain game weeks. So I think Saka is still the best Arsenal asset, despite Kai Havertz being another excellent option up front, and he could be in for a price rise very soon to 8.1 million. Now the third midfielder might be a surprise because he blanked in game week 1, but he was very unlucky, and that's going to be Eze, who took so many shots, he created several chances, and that free kick should have stood, but the referee made a mistake, and in the end it cost Eze owners, and I was one of them. But it is what it is. But Eze will get a lot of returns this season. A bit like Diogo Jota though, his main issue is staying fit. He picks up a lot of problems throughout his time at Crystal Palace, and it looks like he will stay with the Eagles. That 60 million release clause seems to have expired the other day according to multiple reports, and that's good news for those that want to own Eze in the long term. But now let's go for 2 budget midfielders, and this is a potential issue by the way, because it might cause a lack of flexibility and it might require you to downgrade another player, for example Saka to a cheaper midfielder, or probably better still Gvardiol or Trent being downgraded. And if I had to pick one, it would be Gvardiol, because Trent has even better fixtures and his ceiling is way higher. But I'm going to go for a 5.5 million option who is a very popular choice, and that's Smith Rowe at 5.5. I think he can do really well with the upcoming fixtures. He was quite disappointing against Man United. He had a decent start and then faded away as the game went on, but I could see him doing really well against Leicester in Game Week 2 and with Fulham's opening fixtures for the first 5 to 6 game weeks at the very least. So keep an eye out for Smith Rowe still. I would not be selling him just yet. And the same goes for another cheap midfielder who blanked in Game Week 1 but played even better than Smith Rowe in my opinion, and that's Morgan Rogers, who plays Arsenal next. You probably want to bench him on paper, but I still like him for the next 5 to 6 game weeks, and Aston Villa are now top between game weeks 2 to 8 in the fixture difficulty rating. So if you can't go for Ollie Watkins, or you want a cheaper midfielder to cover that Villa attack, Morgan Rogers is still a very good choice, but there could be rotation as Jacob Ramsey, McGinn, and all these players can play as a second striker or on the left-hand side. Those are the 2 main positions that Morgan Rogers plays in, so he's not nailed on completely, but I think he's earned a bit of favour with Unai Emery. Towards the end of last season, he's had a very good pre-season as well, and Game Week 1 was fairly decent against West Ham. So I like this midfield 5, but I do recognise that maybe upgrading one of these midfielders to a 6.5 million option like in Nkunku would be ideal, and if you want to do that, downgrade Gvardiol to make it possible. There is a big debate about whether we should go for Haaland and Salah at the same time, and if not, which one should we pick? On the face of it, Salah is the better option for the first 8 game weeks of the season, but if you're building a wildcard team for Game Week 2, you just can't go without Erling Haaland at home to Ipswich Town. I think that's a very big risk, and you're also wasting the wildcard. You might even want to get him back if he scores a brace or a hat-trick against a newly promoted club. But Salah is still a very capable option against Brentford, but with this setup, you're covering Liverpool with Trent and Jota, and you've got Erling Haaland and Gvardiol against Ipswich Town, and a very balanced squad for Game Week 2 and possibly beyond as well. But I'm going to go for Erling Haaland over Salah in this wildcard. For Game Week 3 though, it might be a different answer, and instead I'll go for the Egyptian. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Of course, on paper, Erling Haaland is the best captain for this game week, but Salah isn't too far behind in my opinion. Now the next forward is going to be a very template pick in Isak, who salvaged an assist against Southampton despite the red card, really changing the complexion of the game, and I still believe Isak could be the second or third best forward in FPL this season. But finally, this will be the most interesting pick of the lot. I do have 6 million left, and Chris Wood looks very good in the short term, but Eddie Nketiah is heavily linked with a move to Nottingham Forest, and he could become the #1 striker, so that has put me off Chris Wood a little bit. He delivered 9 points for me in Game Week 1. I was very happy with it, and he should start in Game Week 2. But instead, I'm going to go for a 5.5 million forward in Danny Welbeck, who's had an excellent pre-season. He even took penalties while João Pedro was on the pitch, and he carried that form over to Gameweek 1 with a massive return. So if you are looking for a 5.5 million forward, Danny Welbeck is currently my favourite, but Jamie Vardy scored against Tottenham. You've also got João Pedro, who still remains a decent choice, and also Rodrigo Muniz at 6 million. I think a lot of you will probably say, why don't you just go for him? But I think with Smith Rowe and Robinson, I'm not a big fan of tripling up on Fulham. I think a double up is already enough, and going for free is probably a bit too excessive. But that's the way I see it. And Brighton have some tough fixtures coming up, like Man United and Arsenal. But after that, it gets better with Ipswich Town and Nottingham Forest at home back-to-back in Game Weeks 4 and 5. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Everyone watching should be able to afford this, as there is 0.5 million left in the bank, so this squad costs 99.5 million at the time of this recording. Let's now jump over to FPL.team and talk about the starting 11 and the captaincy. There are no surprises about the goalkeeper. David Raya would be between the sticks, despite that very difficult game on paper against Aston Villa away. The back three would be Robinson, Trent and Gvardiol, all with home fixtures, and especially the latter two, I could see some massive returns for those players. The midfield would comprise of Eze, Saka, Diogo Jota and Emil Smith Rowe, and the front three would include another former Arsenal player in Danny Welbeck, Erling Haaland and Isak, and the bench is also fairly strong with Bentley, Hall, Rodgers and Greaves. So you've got squad depth, 0.5 million in the bank gives you a bit of flexibility, but I will also highlight some of the issues with this team, and I did talk about it earlier. So having two budget midfielders and also Danny Welbeck up front, that isn't the most ideal in terms of team structure and jumping from one asset to the other. So I'm going to show you a few things you could do if you're not too happy with this sort of structure, and one of them will be to downgrade Gvardiol, and we'll go for another 4.5 million defender, and it could be Joachim Andersen, for example, or Mazzari, or maybe even Lisandro Martinez. One of those three will do the trick. I'm going to go for Joachim Andersen here for this particular example. And with 2 million in the bank, you could also do something like this, where Rodgers is upgraded to Nkuku. And this might not be the best pick because they have just signed Joao Felix, or they're on the verge of doing so. And Chelsea have so many attackers at their disposal, like Pedro Neto, Cole Palmer, Madueke, Sterling. I lose count when I just keep on going through the names. So there is no guarantee Nkuku is a nailed-on starter in the long term, but he should do in Game Week 2. He scored at the Molineux last season, and that's obviously his upcoming fixture, and I wouldn't mind going for him with Chelsea's opening fixtures in mind. They have some excellent games until Game Week 8, and if we actually put him in for Smith Rowe, the expected points does go up quite significantly. But of course, Gvardiol to Andersen has actually dropped the expected points of this team even further. And look, we've got 0.5 million left in the bank, so there's another upgrade you can make here, like Danny Welbeck to Rodrigo Muniz, for as one particular example. I think some of you might like that sort of move, but I have to say, ultimately, I do prefer the 50-man squad I talked about just now, but everyone has their own opinion, and it just goes to show that it's all about your personal preferences in shaping these teams. Some of you might not even want Trent Alexander-Arnold, and instead you want Salah, and by downgrading Trent to Munoz, for example, you do gain 2 million, and that could make the Saka to Salah move also very likely, whilst maintaining Erling Haaland up front. So let me know what your desired 50-man squad is on the wildcard. Will you be playing the chip very early on? And some of you might be asking, should I play the chip? In my opinion, I don't think it's worth playing the wildcard so early on. I'd rather have more information and learn more about the best teams and players in this new season, because that you can't really judge too much from Game Week 1, and a lot of it has been standard victories for the best teams, but there will be surprises over the next couple of weeks, and the Premier League will look a lot different in a month's time. So my advice for most people is to wildcard later this season, but some of you might have built a team for Game Week 1 specifically to get a really high score and then wildcard out of it. I think that could also work out very well, and in some cases the wildcard can still be very strong, but you also need a lot of luck to get a Game Week 2 wildcard completely spot on. Trust me, by Game Week 3, if I make another wildcard team video and podcast, I think it will look very different to this one. Let's go back to the original wildcard team though, that I've discussed throughout most of this video, and discuss the captaincy. Well, with this setup, Erling Haaland is the obvious choice. I've gone for Jota as the vice. I think Isak could also be a decent shout. Even Eze would cross my mind, but I wouldn't captain Saka this week. Danny Welbeck actually might do very well against his former club, but I wouldn't captain him, so to speak, and I'm backing him and Smith Rowe to do very well in these home fixtures, but I don't trust them enough to put the armband on them, so it will be Erling Haaland. If you've got Salah and Haaland, it's actually very difficult, and I don't think there's much separating them, but I would give the edge to Erling Haaland this week. And in Game Week 1, I told most people to captain Salah. It's not obviously anything groundbreaking. I'm not going to claim credit for it, but I wish I just owned Salah. I didn't because of this structure that I wanted to go for in the long term. And let's see how it all goes. Not a great start in Game Week 1 for me, which I'll talk about in the team selection, but also not too shabby. I've got some very good picks, some nice differentials worked out for me, but in the end, I think there's still a lot of ground to be made, and 1.9 million is obviously not actually my best start. If anything, it's one of my worst starts in terms of rank, but it's getting more competitive every single season. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's try to get this video to the 200 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks, the Discord server to join a great community, and also the FPL League. See if you can win the FPL Dylan Mini League by the end of the season. And also check out Draft Town. It's a great resource, which I showed you at the beginning of this podcast. And my Spotify is where you can see all of my videos in audio format. And be sure to leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It goes a long way to support my channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 2 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.